Buongiorno a tutti, ben ritrovati, nel senso che io risalgo sul palco, ho seguito la mattina in streaming. Dunque, apriamo con Smart Rurality, quindi food, innovazione e social media. Quindi, come da tradizione, innanzitutto mi presento, mi chiamo Lorenzo Quarello e sono il fondatore di goodmakers.it, che è una piattaforma che mette in relazione i buoni produttori di vino artigianale, di vino tradizionale, con i buoni bevitori, cioè le persone che cercano prodotti di qualità, naturali, tradizionali e che mantengono e preservano in vita tradizioni e culture di varie regioni italiane e anche straniere. Appunto, sono ovviamente molto felice di essere qui con voi, ho ricevuto l'onore e l'onere di aprire questa parte del pomeriggio e mi concentrerei, diciamo, immediatamente nel darvi una brevissima presentazione di quello che si fa con Goodmakers, per poi andare ad affrontare diciamo, più nel dettaglio una domanda che io mi sono posto venendo qua e che in qualche modo condivido con voi e che provo a darvi, diciamo, almeno il mio punto di vista. Allora, Goodmakers, come dicevamo, piattaforma online, noi effettuiamo delle vendite a tempo che durano 20 giorni, lavoriamo con aziende di medio o piccola dimensione, aziende artigianali a conduzione familiare o comunque di piccola dimensione. E cosa facciamo? Creiamo un network momentaneo, virtuale, quindi una piazza, come se fosse la piazza di un mercato, dove andiamo a raccontare la storia dell'azienda e la storia del vino. Quindi questo lo facciamo secondo una semplicissima prima domanda che viene fatta all'azienda vinicola, che è: ti senti un buon produttore? E da lì partiamo un percorso insieme che ci porterà a visitare l'azienda, a conoscerla, a conoscere i vini e poi a pubblicarla nel network di acquisto. Perché network di acquisto? Che è il nostro modello di business, è un'ibridazione di un gruppo di acquisto e di un'asta a ribasso. Perché? Perché la nostra filiera è breve, quindi abbiamo il buon produttore, abbiamo Goodmakers che crea, diciamo, il network e abbiamo i buoni bevitori. Questo ci permette di avere un prezzo di uscita che agevola l'acquisto e il consumo di vino di qualità senza che questo debba essere economicamente raggiungibile per buona parte dei comuni mortali e allo stesso tempo crea un meccanismo virtuoso che è quello del passaparola, quindi le persone che partecipano all'acquisto sanno che dallo starting price si potrà arrivare a un best price pari almeno 20%. Poi Goodmakers ovviamente vuole mettere in relazione chi produce e chi consuma e quindi organizza eventi offline, quindi eventi fisici. Ce n'è stato uno l'altro ieri a Milano, uno ieri sera a Firenze e speriamo ovviamente di poter crescere e di andare avanti in questa direzione. Invece la domanda di cui vi dicevo prima è questa qui. Oggi sicuramente i social media e quello che noi facciamo con goodmakers.it e cercare di utilizzare i social media per passare parola. Ma quello che secondo me è centrale è porsi una domanda, soprattutto legato alla smart rurality e al potenziale di innovazione. Sono più importanti i media o sono più importanti le idee e i contenuti? Quindi mi permetto, siccome io sono un analogico e provengo dal mondo produttivo, ho lavorato per più di 10 anni in aziende vinicole, non sono, come dire, arrivato al digitale per portare avanti il progetto Goodmakers, quindi non sono la persona adeguata a fornire le migliori ricette di digital marketing, ma invece volevo spostare l'attenzione sulle idee e su tre concetti chiave: il mercato, il fare e l'indignazione. E adesso vi spiego perché. Allora, il mercato, prendo questo libro qui e andiamo a leggere un brevissimo passaggio che è Quello che i soldi non possono comprare di Michael Sandel, il quale ci dice, scusate, ok, la crisi finanziaria non ha suscitato un ripensamento sostanziale dei mercati, primo punto. Questo stato precario del dibattito pubblico, un dibattito serio sul ruolo e sulla portata dei mercati rimane largamente assente dalla nostra vita politica. Questo stato precario del dibattito pubblico è il secondo ostacolo a una discussione sui limiti morali dei mercati, in un'epoca in cui il dibattito politico consiste soprattutto in confronti dai toni accesi in televisione, in un livore fazioso e in battaglie ideologiche. È difficile quindi immaginare un dibattito pubblico che rifletta su questioni morali controverse, quali il giusto modo di valutare la procreazione, l'infanzia, l'istruzione, la salute, l'ambiente, la cittadinanza e altri beni. Voilà. Quindi la sfida morale e politica che affrontiamo oggi è più diffusa e più banale, quindi è banale, consiste nel ripensare il ruolo e la portata dei mercati all'interno delle nostre attività sociali, delle relazioni umane e della quotidianità. Il fare. E allora mi è venuto in mente Adriano Olivetti, con Il mondo che nasce, penso che tutti lo conoscano almeno per sentito dire, è stato un industriale italiano particolarmente illuminato e in un discorso che ha fatto in fabbrica appena terminata la seconda guerra mondiale ha detto ai suoi dipendenti: c'era al di là dell'Atlantico il modello, c'era una spinta quasi inesorabile ad andare verso un nuovo stato di cose più grande, più efficiente, dove molti più lavoratori avrebbero trovato ragione di esistenza. Ma mio padre esitava perché, e me lo disse per lunghi anni e per lunghi momenti, perché la grande fabbrica avrebbe distrutto l'uomo, avrebbe distrutto una possibilità di contatti umani, avrebbe portato a considerare tutto l'ingranaggio umano come un ingranaggio meccanico, ogni uomo come un numero. C'è una crisi di civiltà, c'è una crisi sociale, c'è una crisi politica. Come possiamo contribuire col nostro sforzo e col nostro lavoro a costruire quel mondo migliore che anni terribili di desolazione, di tormenti, di disastri, di distruzione, di massacri chiedono all'intelletto e al cuore di tutti, affinché giorni così tristi né i nostri figli, né i figli dei nostri figli e molte generazioni ancora dovranno una seconda volta affrontare? Cosa faremo? Cosa faremo? Tutto si riassume in un solo pensiero, in un solo insegnamento. Saremo condotti da valori spirituali. Questi sono valori eterni. Seguendo questi, i beni materiali sorgeranno da sé senza che noi li ricerchiamo. Ultimo punto è l'indignazione. Quindi prendo ovviamente sempre spunto da Stéphane Hessel, il quale, facendo riferimento alla Dichiarazione universale dei diritti dell'uomo, scrisse: di quei principi e di quei valori oggi abbiamo più che mai bisogno. Spetta a noi, tutti insieme, vigilare perché la nostra società sia una società di cui andare fieri. L'interesse generale deve prevalere sull'interesse particolare. L'equa distribuzione delle ricchezze prodotte dal mondo del lavoro deve prevalere sul potere del denaro. Quindi io ho voluto leggervi questi tre passaggi perché ritengo che siano molto più significativi del fatto che, nonostante i tempi cambino e quindi i media cambino, le istanze, le necessità, le sensibilità possono essere le medesime. Sicuramente oggi siamo chiamati, come è successo dopo un conflitto mondiale, a dei cambiamenti molto significativi e i media possono essere uno strumento decisivo per innovare, per cambiare, per far veicolare concetti e scelte, come possono essere quelle di cui adesso andremo a sentire, molto molto positive, interessanti, che sono fiducioso stravolgeranno il mondo e lo cambieranno. E chiudo sempre con un pensiero che non è mio, che è creare e resistere, resistere e creare. E adesso lascio la parola a Kristin Larsen, che vi racconterà di Open Food Network e che quindi sarà, come dire, il focus di questa prima parte del pomeriggio.
Okay, hello everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me, for having me here. Before I go any further, I just want to point out the amazing translator in this box over here. I'm like completely stunned. But so I'm going to try very hard. When I get excited, I talk really, really fast and I get really excited. So I'm going to try not to do that. So I'm going to be very measured. I'm here to talk about the Open Food Network. As I talk about the Open Food Network, I'm going to be touching on a bunch of themes around, why it came to exist, why we're doing it the way we're doing it, what it does, some potential opportunities. Really excited to be opening up this conversation with you. I think there's a bunch of themes that Lorenzo just touched on that sit within this slide when I was kind of trying to position why are we doing this. He talked about spirituality, which, at its core is about connection and is about care. I don't think that markets run counter to having connections and caring, connections with the earth, connections with other people. This is what food is all about. And what we need to do is make sure that our markets are actually working towards that end. The critical things that make markets not work are when you don't have free flow of information, people don't actually have the information they need to make choices, and that people actually can't make choices because you have too much concentration of power, and it's not possible for smaller players to actually participate in the market, to have access to the market, and to be able to thrive. So I think critically what we're trying to do in food systems, when it comes to the core of it, we're trying to remove the concentration of power in the food system, in the global food systems, in our national food systems. And I think probably we all believe that the internet, the technology that we have at our fingertips is a really powerful tool in how we do this, how we can recreate connections, use information to change the concentration of power and put it back in the hands of local food systems, local communities, farmers and eaters. That's what we're all about. Just to give you a little bit of Australian context, I landed in Italy all of yesterday afternoon, so I don't pretend to know anything really about Italy, other than it has awesome food. Some of my first reflections are that things seem in some ways not as bad as Australia. In Australia we have two supermarkets, Coles and Woolworths, and between them they control 80% of the national grocery retail sector. So they have the farmers absolutely by the neck, and they're in a price war about $1 for a litre of milk. So lots and lots of farmers going broke, and they don't really have that many other options because there's only two supermarkets. So similarly, people were talking about farmer suicide. I don't know the stats for Australia, but they're high. 300 farmers a month have left the land. That's been happening for 40 years now. So you think about the loss of skills that goes with that. At the same time as we have such a incredibly old and incredibly young country, it's been about 200 years we've been trying to apply European farming methods to Australian land, and they haven't been very successful, so we've made a big mess. So there is a lot to be learned and a lot that needs to be recovered from. We also have the fastest growing rate of obesity in the world, and we're already on par with US in terms of the levels of obesity that we have in the population. The two pictures at the bottom are just we break temperature records every year, and we have the dubious honour of being the only country in the world that's actively removing legislation and policy to try and reduce carbon emissions. Awesome, we should have a round of applause for that. And we're still busily building houses all over our best agricultural land on the edge of the cities. So that picture there, which you can't see very well, is a highly productive market garden. And on the other side of the road, they did at least put a road, if you call that a buffer, is new suburbs. This is going on rampantly all around Australian cities. Good news, resistance is fertile. There's a lot going on out there. There's a lot of young farmers. There's a lot of old farmers innovating. There's a lot of amazing things going on. Some of the things that have been talked about getting back to the land, people creating new livelihoods in farming, people very interested. Australia is the home of permaculture. There's a movement around regenerative agriculture, so with people not so much talking about sustainable agriculture, but how do we actually recover from the mess we've made and fix things, or at least improve them. Farmers are using the internet extensively and social media to connect with buyers and with each other. There's some really popular forums, people using Twitter, one called AgChat Oz that attracts hundreds of people every week. The distances in Australia are immense. There's about 20 million people in a landmass. You know, I was going to put maps up, but I ran out of time. It's really big, so lots of people are very remote. So the internet and social media is a really critical communications tool around how farmers are actually talking to each other, and an increasing kind of growing groundswell around how do farmers actually connect with buyers and have more control over their markets. At the same time, the distances that we're dealing with are huge, and many of the farms are quite big. How do you move enough food to actually make that a viable alternative for someone who is a commodity farmer? So on one end, we have young people, new people going back to the land, starting small farms, doing lots of innovative things. On the other hand, we have farmers committing suicide, leaving the land, and we need to try and work out how to change the economics for them as well. So we need more of all of the good things, and we need to work out how to replicate things that are working and scale up the amount of food, the amount of ethically, sustainably produced food that we can actually get to markets and to people. So, scales of food distribution. I'll go through this quite quickly. I like this picture. All of these coexist at all times. We have people producing their own food for their own consumption. We have people doing direct marketing, so where a farmer grows the food and then they go to the farmer's market and they sell it directly to you, or they do a community-supported agriculture and they have a relationship with some families who buy the food every month, etc. Oops. And then the next level up, which is the area that I'm really interested in at the moment, is around partnerships in supply chains and logistics, particularly around food hubs, how groups of farmers work together or how people work with farmers to actually support them in their marketing, the aggregation and the distribution of food, so that we can start to do things more efficiently without centralizing control in just-in-time supermarket supply chains. So that's the challenge. How do we build lots and lots of diverse food aggregation and distribution models? So food hubs, yeah, basically they're aiming to make it easier to buy and sell local food, to keep the source identification of the farmer all the way through to the customer and help those farmers tell their stories. What do we want? We want to go from a few large growers through, in our case, 2 supermarkets to poor quality food on our plates, to lots and lots of growers doing lots and lots of different things through local and regional food hubs and supply chains to get healthy, fresh food onto everybody's plates. So that's the challenge. Good prices for farmers and affordable food for everybody. When we started looking into this, about how we could facilitate more of this activity to happen, we went around and spoke to lots and lots of people running food co-ops and box schemes and community-supported agriculture, etc. We could see some things that weren't happening and we wanted to know whether they could be, and particularly we were interested in the role of technology. What we found over and over again was people buried in spreadsheets trying to keep track of boxes of food on paper and pens. Especially the transaction cost of dealing with lots of small farmers is very high. There's a large organisational kind of capacity. Lots of these groups are doing things voluntarily, people getting burnt out. It's quite exhausting. There's a whole lot going on in this space. At the same time, we found that there was technology, but it was generally designed for one particular business model. Like, as long as you do things exactly like this piece of software will work. Or a group had spent 20 years working out a model that works. Someone comes along, develops software for them, and then tries to sell the software back to them. And the knowledge or the ownership of how that model was actually working then gets kind of locked up and privatized. We also were very interested in how, look, if we're going to scale this, the solutions we're looking for need to be networked. So a farmer doesn't want to be able to just work with one food hub. If we're going to move larger quantities of food, they need to be able to access a range of different aggregators, distributors, markets, etc. So what we discovered after talking to lots of people, that what we wanted didn't exist. We wanted something that creates network effects so that the farmers can access lots of food hubs, so that the customers can find food hubs in the area that suit them easily, etc. that it enables diversity, that the different business models in these aggregators and distribution entities can be supported. There's some common patterns across all of them, and if we can support those common patterns, then there's room for people to specialize on top of that, to come up with a model that suits their community and the people that they're working with. We're very passionate about transparency and about accountability, about the farmer being able to tell their own story, explain their own production practices. I was very excited about the social labelling initiative that was talked about earlier. I'm really looking forward to talking to them about that some more. I think about how we actually understand our own standards about what the community says is good food, and how we make sure that people, when they're purchasing food, can actually see and access that information. And absolutely, I believe in open source. I think that at this point on the planet, the idea of locking up the knowledge or the tools or something that you know because you want to make sure that you can privatize and extract all the value out of that is just purely unethical, as well as actually quite impractical. For the tasks that we're taking on in this space, we need all of the smartest people that we can find to work on them. We would certainly have not got this far without the project, with this project, if we hadn't been open source and therefore able to excite people to come and work on the project, to put their time and energy into it, etc. Okay, so we discovered that what we wanted didn't exist. I'm not a software developer, but we basically decided, well, if it doesn't exist, we want to make it exist. So we need to work out how to do that. So we started with small experiments, and it kind of grew from there, which I'll now tell you about. But this is my pause button with this little quote. The internet doesn't cause revolutions, it's a communications network. And what we do with it requires moral judgment. So just by connecting people or just by developing sharing initiatives doesn't mean we're necessarily going to be able to change power structures. And we need to be kind of alert to that. So when we made the decision that we wanted to head down this path and do this project, we decided that we wanted to kind of take a breath and try and put a platform in place that made it possible to actually build a strong collaborative community around this, and to be impeccable in our own transparency about ownership, about money, about IP, about who owned this and how people could feel safe in getting involved, that this was a public good and that it wasn't going to be privatised. So we set up a non-profit organisation, the Open Food Foundation, which is an Australian charity which exists to develop and protect a commons of open source knowledge, code, applications and platforms for fair and sustainable food. My background is in government. I've worked quite a long time in kind of provincial government and climate policy and food policy. And so as my partner in crime, Serenity, so we have a very strong allergy to centralisation of control and to control of information. So everything that we've done is to try and design to make it almost impossible for people to therefore re-centralise control in this network. When we started to look at how to do this, there was a fair bit of reading about and a lot of inspiration from nature and from mycelium. What we're trying to do here is move nutrients efficiently through a system where there is no central controller, there's no one agent making decisions, and that's how mycelia work. We know that these networks can exist in nature, therefore we kind of like, they can exist. That doesn't mean that we necessarily know how to do it, but that's the kind of inspiration. So from out of that has come the Open Food Network. The aim is to create an online platform, a marketplace that makes it easier to find, buy, sell and move sustainable local food. I'm going to talk a little bit about where the technology is actually up to, what it means right now. So as a producer, the most basic interaction with it is that you can set up an online profile, you know, photos, description, your social media links, your contact information, etc. That means that you'll come up in the listings, come up on the map, people can contact you, and then they can buy from you offline. We're not trying to control people's access to farmers or anything like that. That'll do. As a producer, this is one of the critical things that's different about this platform. You can also connect with and sell through a wide variety of hubs, whether they be co-ops, seasonal boxes, community-supported agriculture, etc. So if you're upgrading your inventory about what products you've got available, you set your own price and you can choose who you make them available to sell on to help you manage the distribution. The hubs can have many different business models, as I've talked about before. They've got a lot of flexibility about fee structures, about, is it 10% extra we put on it, etc. The critical thing about this platform is that it makes that transparent. So to the customer, they can see how much they're paying and they can see how much has gone to the farmer. At every point through the system, they can see exactly who that orange, carrot, whoever came from, click up and see that farmer's profile, etc. All right. I might just quickly say on that. So when someone's trading on the Open Food Network, they set up their own payment, shipment, delivery methods, etc. The money does not come through us. They set up their own PayPal account or payment details or whatever it is. Okay, and the other thing that we have is that as a producer, I can set up a shopfront and sell directly. So the hassle of actually trying to set up your own website, your own e-commerce site, can be quite significant for people. I think there's estimates that the average small business spends $4,000 or $5,000 a year just trying to run a website that doesn't even have e-commerce. So we really wanted to drop the barrier to entry for farmers who are trying to do this to say, look, here you go, come, you can set it up on this platform, you can run your payments, manage your orders, manage your inventory, and have access to this network of customers and food hubs and everyone else who's coming through the platform. This is an example of one of the farmers we're working with, Tammy Jonas. They're ethical free-range pig farmers. I might just keep talking, I think. I'm pretty sure that's not a question. And so some of the flexibility in the system about the way that it works for food hubs can also be used by farmers to manage the timing of, if you buy by this time, it will be available in Melbourne. I've set up a Melbourne delivery run, or I set up my Victorian delivery run, and to have a bunch of different pickup locations so that they're not necessarily doing home delivery to everyone unless that's what they want. Anyway, I'm getting into detail. As a hub, I can coordinate a network of hubs. So this is part of the critical thing, is about how we're putting the infrastructure in place for really flexible trading relationships and combinations. So if somebody sets up an order cycle, that's like, all right, I'm working with these 10 farmers. It's all coming into wherever our aggregation point is. And then we've got another, however many collection points, etc., around the city. I'll explain how this works with a specific example. When we're setting this up, we've got lots of flexibility and independence about when orders open and close, what products are available where. So some groups only want certified organic, some don't mind. There's a lot of flexibility in that. Some want dairy, some just want fruit and veg. So you've got lots of fine-grained control over what's available where. And the fee structure and pricing structure creates lots of opportunities for micro-enterprise. So if somebody's running a hub or a collection point at a school or a community centre, that they can do some of the packing, or they can put a markup on to raise funds for the school, or they can start creating their own home-based business and they might offer home delivery, etc. So the whole thing is designed for people to take responsibility for these different jobs, these different aspects of food distribution throughout the network. So as a buyer, I can find the producers and hubs in my area with the kind of food that I want, and then I can go and buy from them. Okay, here's an example. So in about 3 minutes, so I'll talk really fast. So the Southeast Food Hub is a project that we've been doing in parallel to actually start a food hub in Australia. We're operating in the southeast of Melbourne in one of these crazy growth areas where I showed the photo before, really valuable horticultural areas with new suburbs going across paddocks. Heaps of local variety. One of the first things we did was to go and map what fruit and veg are available across the year. This project is funded by health agencies and done through the university, because really we're about how do we get fresh fruit and vegetables from the farms in the area to the people in the area who are currently not eating them. And basically, how does it work? It's a combination of all of the above. We're working with about 10 different farmers, so we find out what's fresh on the farm that week. We set it up on the Open Food Network. Customers come through and place orders. We're working with a range of retail and wholesale and household and community groups, etc. The farmers receive one consolidated order, so the total amount that's needed. They bring it into a warehouse that we're working with a social enterprise, so there's employment and training opportunities for people, and we've created 3 jobs now out of that. They pack the food up into the individual orders, and we have a partnership with a local distribution company who's also passionate about local food, who then does a lot of the delivery for us. There's some photos. Now that we've got the model kind of working in that sense, it makes it a lot easier for people to work out, go and talk to their community, what's the desire, what's the need, and start something up quite quickly. So we have a project in Mildura, which is in far north of Victoria, really productive agricultural area, lots of oranges and things like that. And it's very difficult to actually access that food in Mildura. So the first small trial that we've started there is actually with farmers bringing produce in and being available through a school buying group. For Open Food Network perspective, where we're at, we have closed beta sites, as in, this is constantly under development, but they're in operation in Australia and in the UK. We ran crowdfunding in August this year and were able to raise $35,000, which was fantastic. And part of that was, as Cheryl was talking about before, about the communications, about getting out there, about working out who our next early adopters, who the next groups that might want to be involved in the platform were. We are aiming at the end of October, in fact the day after I get back from Europe, to launch our open beta platform, which will enable farmers to set up their own profiles and start trading through the site. We're not yet opening for hubs to set themselves up because that's more complex and requires time and effort from us. So we won't be launching that until March. We are running one instance of this software for Australia at the moment because it's complex. Anyway, I'll talk about that in a second. And then we're aiming to publicly launch in March. So between now and March, we're onboarding a whole lot more producers, hubs, different models of hubs, working with a range of local councils who are going to use it effectively as a directory of all of the producers and hubs in their area. We've got some exciting trials with farmers markets who are going to be providing online pre-sales options along with the markets and potentially delivery from the markets, etc. And as I said, we've got an operating pilot in the UK because one of our volunteers just set it up for them. And I'll be spending a week in the UK after this because we've got about 6 hubs and we're looking at taking the next step into actually getting the rest of them up and running. We've had contact from people all over the world interested in using this platform and getting onto it. The code is all open source. It's on GitHub. You can go and use it, but it's not simple. It's quite technically complex. This is not sort of, you can hack around a little bit with a website, so you'll be able to set this up and get it running. This is one of our challenges at the moment, is how do we actually both build the platform, launch it, and put the energy that's needed into actually getting the code and the documentation to a point where it is more welcoming for other contributors to be able to get involved and help to build it. We also have challenges around international governance and collaboration. We're not interested in running a multinational open food network. We don't want to be in control of anyone else's food system, and we would much rather have it distributed. So we're encouraging groups to organise their own governance, and then we just have a sort of MOU, as long as you're a non-profit, no one's distributing profit privately and buy into the values, then you can use the branded software. But what we're finding at the moment is that people are like, can't you just set it up and run it for us so that we can start using it? So we're kind of just really wrestling with that at the moment. We don't quite know what to do. Lots of conversations going on about interoperability. We are not the only piece of software in this space. There's other food hub software, there's lots of other software. There's really exciting conversations starting to happen at the meta level of how do we get these bits of software to talk to each other, so that if someone's using another piece of software, they can still access the data about the farmers or the data about the food, or someone else is doing social labelling, for example, that our farmers can actually just connect off to their platform to receive their ratings about, their production practices, etc. So that's where I would like to see all of this going over the next, 5 to 10 years. Also, money development, we were talking quite a bit at lunch. We really want our developers to not have to go and work at banks and do this on the side. This is what they want to do. They love it. So we're really trying to balance all of that at the moment about how do we make sure that everyone gets it paid enough that they can spend all the time they want working on the things that they're passionate about. So we are really trying to work out business models and money and all of that kind of thing at the moment. So I'm only 4 minutes over. It's not too bad for me. Stay in touch or get involved. I'll be around. I'm really happy to talk about this stuff for hours. There's the stuff on GitHub. If you happen to be a guru and any or all of those things, by all means, come and talk to us and start helping to build it. We've also set up a rudimentary kind of community space where we're having the conversations, the documentation, the roadmap. We've got a group of people from around the world who are interested in this interoperability API kind of space, starting to have those conversations there. And we're very happy to support any other open food programs through use of that infrastructure, through pointing people to them. There's amazing stuff happening all over the place. So we have started to build, you know, very basic kind of wiki page of what are all the open food projects that we know about. So we're just kind of putting little bits and pieces in place there, but we don't really have the time to drive it at the moment. You can email me, you can Skype me. That's pretty much it. Am I going to need?
Make it in English or in Italian?
English is good for me.
Okay. So I'm working on a similar project here in Italy in a startup called
Sorry, I can't.
Sorry. So I'm working on a similar project in a startup here in Italy called that is aiming to create a network between among the.
Sorry, can you just stand up and yell because I don't think your mic's working. I got that you're a similar project.
Our idea is to create a network between the producer, the small, middle-sized producer of enogastronomic products. So it's not farmers, but they are producers of typical products. And we wanted to make a network among them to give them visibility, to talk about their stories, and give them the same tool as e-commerce as you were talking about.
Yep.
The problem we are facing is that sometimes we still find this producer to be a bit annoyed by the fact that they will be in the same website or in the same project as their competitors. So I wanted to ask you, or also Lorenzo, if you got the same problem and how did you manage to educate them that together we can be stronger and they can get much better and much more visible?
I think we are dealing with, I might just flick back a couple of slides. We are dealing very much over on the left of this curve at the moment with the innovators and the early adopters and the people who really get it and are excited about it. So we're not at the point where we're trying to coax anyone, you know, so if they want to be on it, then fantastic. And if they don't, you know, we sort of figure that they'll get pulled. We have started to tip into, you know, less of the people that you would completely expect. You know, the people who grew up on farms and then went and did their engineering degrees and then went back to the farms. They're the kind of the first ones. But we are starting to tip into some more conventional kind of growers who are like, all right, well, it can't do any harm to have a profile there and things like that. So we haven't really encountered that problem yet, so we'll see. Maybe it's kind of related. We have had a problem with someone who was trying to run a food hub who wanted us to not have the contact information for the farmers on the farmers' profiles because they were kind of like, well, but if people can contact the farmers, then they won't go through the food hub. And we were just kind of like, well, if you're not providing a service that people need and it's convenient for the farmers to drive around and drop all those orders off, then you're not providing a service that people need, and we're in service to the farmers first. So at that point, we were kind of fairly, you know, non-negotiable. So I think, you know, we'll just feel our way through it when it happens, I think.
Ci sono altre domande? Io ho una domanda per te. Volevo capire meglio, ovviamente non... Dicevo una domanda per te. Se era possibile soffermarsi di più su quello che è l'aspetto logistico, perché è stato tirato fuori l'argomento del, chiamiamole, gelosie commerciali, ma giustamente come spiegavi, o noi diamo un servizio che effettivamente ha un valore aggiunto per il produttore, oppure come dire, o stiamo sbagliando noi o quel produttore seguirà un'altra strada. Invece quello che mi interessava molto, secondo me, e che vale la pena approfondire perché è un grandissimo problema, è quello logistico, cioè come se da un punto di vista, chiamiamolo di piattaforma, no? Quindi c'è un open source, c'è la possibilità di crescere, ma c'è poi il problema logistico che è un problema reale e che molto spesso è poi lo scoglio concreto nel portare avanti un progetto così ampio e così complesso e così anche ambizioso.
Yeah, yep, absolutely. Logistics is hard. And I guess the core assumption of what we're trying to do with this platform, or the models that we were looking at, is that there is some of the pain taken out of logistics by only moving food when it's already been purchased, when you already know where it's going, so it's a kind of demand pull. And secondly, by working with the network with these hubs, that you're able to bring more food to one place, so that you're able to take the orders from a whole lot of people and say, we want 60 kilos of apples, not 60 times 1 kilo of apples, for example. The platform, we've kind of always said we are trying to provide information for people to make decisions. We are not trying to make the decisions for people. That might come somewhere down the track, optimization or things like that to help. But at the moment, it is still a case that the farmers would be talking to the hubs as to, okay, well, who's bringing this from here to here, and somebody organises a truck. But the critical thing that we're trying to do is say, at least you're moving a substantial amount of food when you do that. We have started through random acts of kindness, we've started an experimental project around transport sharing, a kind of bidding, an ability to show, right, this is all of the food that needs to move from here to here on this date, and for people to be able to pick up and piggyback, my truck is going from here to here, I can take that, which can potentially be used by groups of farmers in the hubs to coordinate who's driving. Yeah, and similarly, people are interested in the same thing at the other end, that groups of customers can do it, someone can pick it up and drop off for other people. But yeah, it's very much at the point of saying, look, if we can at least get bigger amounts of food, so it's more worthwhile. We can get more food moving at the same time by using autocycles to kind of coordinate that. And we can give people information, and potentially then we can start to work towards building tools. I think one of the things, it's again the API question. It'd be quite good to be able to then just, where it makes sense, ping it off into Australia Post or ping it off into third-party logistics services and just automate your bookings. Like all of that stuff could happen, but we're not up to that yet.
Grazie. Ci sono altre domande?
Let's see. Maybe I'll sing a song.
Grazie.